I gently tapped the edge of the cashier's check against my chin, a crisp $10,000 rectangle of pure, unadulterated vindication. To understand how I got here, holding a check signed by the man who tried to fleece me, you have to go back to the beginning, to a single, infuriating sticker on my truck window. 3 weeks ago, my life smelled of sawdust and tung oil. I'm a custom furniture maker, and my garage isn't a place for cars. It's my sanctuary, my workshop. The air hangs thick with the sweet, earthy scent of black walnut and the sharp perfume of cherry wood. My days are spent coaxing life back into fallen trees, transforming rough-sawn slabs into pieces of functional art. My hands, perpetually calloused and stained, know the language of grain and joinery better than they know anything else. At the time, I was working on the biggest commission of my career, a 12-foot live-edge dining table for a tech CEO with a new mansion and an appreciation for craftsmanship. The slab of black walnut alone had cost me a small fortune, and I'd spent over 100 hours meticulously flattening, sanding, and finishing it. I traced the dark, swirling grain with my fingertips, feeling the history in the wood. This table wasn't just a project. It was my masterpiece, the kind of piece that would get my name into architectural magazines and lead to a wait list of clients. My partner in this whole enterprise was Bessie, my slightly dented but unfailingly loyal Ford F-150. She was my workhorse. She hauled the raw lumber from the mill, carried my tools to on-site installations, and, most importantly, was the only way I could deliver a 400-pound table to a client's home. She wasn't pretty, with a permanent layer of sawdust in the truck bed and a scratch on the passenger door from a rogue piece of reclaimed oak, but she was essential. She was my business on wheels, and she was parked perfectly legally in my own driveway, in the suburban beige neighborhood I'd saved for years to afford a small house in. A neighborhood governed by the iron-fisted, perennially displeased Carol, our HOA president. I first met Carol's particular brand of toxicity on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the driveway, wiping down Bessie's dashboard and organizing the cab after a trip to the lumberyard. The sun was warm, a gentle breeze was blowing, and I was feeling that quiet satisfaction that comes from a productive day's work. "My, what a busy bee you are, dear." I looked up to see Carol standing on the edge of my lawn, her arms crossed. She was a woman who seemed to be perpetually clad in crisp linen and judgment, her silver hair sculpted into a helmet-like bob that not a single strand dared escape. "Hi, Carol, just trying to make a living," I said, forcing a polite smile. Her eyes scanned from me to my truck, a slow, deliberate appraisal that made my skin crawl. Of course, that's a substantial vehicle you have there." I felt a familiar prickle of defensiveness. She gets the job done. "I'm sure," Carol said, her own smile not reaching her eyes. "It's just that we are all so dedicated to maintaining the aesthetic of the neighborhood, you know, keeping things neat and residential." She gestured vaguely at the street, where identical manicured lawns sat in front of identical beige houses. My truck, a tool of a trade, was a smudge of reality on her pristine canvas. "It's my work truck," I said, my voice a little firmer than I intended. "It's parked in my driveway, which is allowed." I knew the bylaws by heart. I'd read them cover to cover before I even made an offer on the house. Carol let out a little, tinkling laugh. "Oh, I'm sure you believe so. It's just some of the other residents have made comments about the commercial nature of it. It's a delicate balance, you understand. We just want to ensure everything feels harmonious and peaceful for everyone." The classic some residents line, the phantom complainer she always invoked to give her personal decrees the weight of a populist movement. She was talking about my livelihood as if it were an overgrown hedge or an unapproved paint color. "Well, it's my personal vehicle that I also use for work. There's no commercial lettering on it," I stated, my patience wearing thin. "For now," she chirped, her eyes glinting. "You just have a lovely day now." She turned and glided away, leaving the scent of her expensive perfume and a thick cloud of passive aggression hanging in the air. I watched her go, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach, It wasn't a friendly chat. It was a warning, and I had no idea how much trouble that warning was about to bring. The warning hung in the air for exactly 1 week. 1 week where I worked with a nervous energy, trying to get ahead on the walnut table, acutely aware of Bessie sitting in my driveway like a target. Every time I heard a car slow down on our street, my stomach would clench. I started parking her as close to the garage door as I could, a ridiculously symbolic gesture, as if I could physically shield her from Carol's disapproval. The blow came on a Friday morning. It was delivery day. The table was finished, a gleaming 400-pound testament to my craft, resting on padded sawhorses in my workshop. The client was expecting it at noon. I had 2 friends on standby, ready to help me load it into Bessie's bed. All I needed to do was grab a coffee and get started. I opened my front door, mug in hand, and stopped dead. The driveway was empty. My mind refused to process it for a second. I blinked, expecting Bessie to shimmer back into existence, but there was only a pale, oil-stained patch of concrete where my truck should have been, a hollow space where my business used to be. A wave of pure, cold panic washed over me. Stolen? My heart hammered against my ribs. I scanned the street, my neighborhood, suddenly looking alien and hostile. And then I saw it. Stuck to the concrete right where Bessie's driver's side door would have been was a neon orange sticker. I knelt, my knees scraping on the rough driveway. It was an HOA violation notice. Vehicle in violation of Covenant 7.14, prohibition of commercial vehicles. Below that, in bold, aggressive print, this vehicle has been impounded by Carol's nephew's towing. I'm not kidding. It didn't actually say Carol's nephew's towing, but it might as well have. The company name was Prestige Towing and Recovery, and below that was a phone number and an impound lot address on the other side of the county. This is the part of the story, by the way, where things get truly infuriating. If you're enjoying watching me take down a corrupt HOA, and you haven't already, now would be a great time to hit that subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss how this ends. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number. A bored-sounding man answered. I explained, my voice tight, that my truck had been towed from my private driveway. Yeah, got an F-150 here from that address, he grunted. HOA call. That'll be $1,200, cash or cashier's check only. I choked. $1,200 for what? Towing fee, admin fee, first day's storage. It's all on the invoice, lady. We're open till 5. He hung up. $1,200. I didn't have $1,200. Not liquid, anyway. Every spare cent I had was tied up in the wood for this commission and the next. The client's final payment was supposed to be my cushion, my profit, the money that would finally get me ahead. But I couldn't get that payment without the table, and I couldn't deliver the table without my truck. It was a perfect, vicious circle, and I could feel the walls closing in. Rage, hot and pure, burned through the panic. I didn't even bother to knock. I marched across the street and hammered on Carol's front door with the flat of my hand. She opened it, wearing a silk robe, a half-empty teacup in her hand. She looked utterly unfazed, as if she'd been expecting me. "You had my truck towed," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "I didn't do anything," she said, taking a delicate sip of tea. "The association simply enforced the bylaws you agreed to when you bought your home. We have a standard contract with Prestige Towing for such matters." "Standard contract? Carol, that's extortion. $1,200. I have a delivery today, my biggest client. I'll lose the job." She looked at me, a flicker of something ugly and triumphant in her eyes. It was the look of a predator who has successfully cornered its prey. She set her teacup on a small table inside the door and folded her arms. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "that sounds like a personal financial problem, not an HOA matter. Perhaps if you focused on a more suitable, neighborhood-friendly career, you wouldn't have these issues." "This is my career. It's my livelihood. I poured everything I have into this commission. I could hear the desperation in my own voice and hated it. I need that money, Carol. She leaned against the doorframe, her smile a thin, cruel line. You know, I've heard you talking about this big, important client, this windfall you were expecting. She paused, savoring the moment, letting the silence stretch. Frankly, someone like you, with all your noise and your sawdust and your general disruption, you don't deserve it. The words hit me harder than a slap. It wasn't about the truck. It was never about the truck. It was about me. She believed I, a woman who worked with her hands, was fundamentally unworthy of success in her pristine beige world. I just stood there on her manicured welcome mat, the injustice of it all stealing the air from my lungs. I was trapped, and she knew it. For a second, I just stared at her, the words, "You don't deserve it," echoing in the space between us. It was so nakedly cruel, so devoid of the usual passive-aggressive fluff, that it shocked the rage right out of me. In its place, a cold, desperate clarity took hold. Anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. My masterpiece, my rent money, my entire reputation was sitting in an impound lot on the other side of the county. I needed to grovel. I took a deep breath, forcing my clenched fists to relax at my sides. "Carol, please," I began, hating the pleading tone that crept into my voice. "Let's just talk about this. I've read the bylaws. Covenant 7.14 is for commercial vehicles, which are defined as having business signage or modified for commercial purposes. Bessie, my truck, is just a standard F-150. It's my personal vehicle. It's registered to me, not a business. Legally, it doesn't fit the definition." I was trying to appeal to the part of her that loved rules, hoping she'd appreciate the letter of the law. I was wrong. She simply arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Okay," I pressed on, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Okay, I understand you don't like the look of it. I get it. It's a work truck. So how about a compromise? I'll clear out space in my garage. From now on, I will park it inside, every single night. You'll never have to see it again. All I'm asking is for you to call Prestige Towing and tell them it was a mistake. Please, I have to deliver this table by noon. This client, this is everything for me." I let the pathetic truth of it hang in the air. I was laying my professional life at her feet, begging her not to stomp on it. For a moment, she was silent. She looked from my face, down to my sawdust-dusted boots, and then back up. Then it came. It wasn't a loud, booming laugh, but a quiet, silvery tinkle of pure, unadulterated amusement. It was the most soul-crushing sound I had ever heard. "Oh, you are just precious," she breathed, a wide, genuine smile finally gracing her lips. It was terrifying. "You think this is a negotiation? You think your little interpretation of the rules matters to me? You broke the spirit of the rule, dear. That's all the justification I need." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let me give you a piece of advice. People who matter, people who deserve to live in neighborhoods like this don't have personal financial problems. That can be ruined by a simple towing fee. You're in over your head. Maybe this is the universe's way of telling you to go back to whatever dusty little corner you crawled out of." She patted the doorframe as if to brush away my contamination. "Run along now, I have a tea time to get to." And with that, she closed the door. The soft click of the lock sliding into place was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping. I stood there on her porch for a full minute, unable to move. The world seemed to shrink and go silent, all the air sucked out of it. I walked back across the street in a daze, my own house looking like a stranger's. The empty space in my driveway was a gaping wound. I went into the garage. The smell of walnut and oil, usually my comfort, was suffocating. There it was, the table. It gleamed under the shop lights, the dark swirling grain looking like a galaxy of trapped stars. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever made, a 400-pound anchor chaining me to my failure. My mind was a frantic cyclone of dead ends. $1,200, it might as well have been $1 million. My business account was drained from buying the slab. My personal savings were gone, used for the down payment on this house in this neighborhood, governed by that monster. My one credit card was maxed out from tool upgrades. I couldn't call the client and ask for an advance. The final payment was due on delivery. Admitting I couldn't deliver would be professional suicide. I couldn't call my 2 friends who were supposed to help me move it. What were we going to do? Carry it on our backs for 20 miles? I couldn't even rent a U-Haul. They wouldn't take cash, and I had no available credit. I was trapped, utterly and completely trapped. Carol hadn't just towed my truck. She had surgically and maliciously severed my lifeline, and she had done it for sport. She did it because she looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong, someone whose success was an affront to her manicured world. And she had won. I sank down onto a stool, rested my forehead against the cool, smooth edge of my masterpiece, and felt the hot sting of hopeless tears. I don't know how long I sat there, my cheek pressed against the cold, unyielding walnut. The tears came and went, leaving me hollowed out and exhausted. Carol's voice was on a loop in my head, that silvery laugh, that final, dismissive pronouncement, "You don't deserve it." She hadn't just attacked my business, she had passed judgment on my entire existence. And the worst part was, sitting there in my silent workshop, chained to my own beautiful failure, I was starting to believe her. But then, something else started to bubble up from the depths of that despair. It was a slow, hot burn that started in my gut. I build things. I take chaotic, raw, splintered things others might see as firewood, and I find the beauty inside. I impose order. I solve problems with a saw, a chisel, a plane. I don't give up when a mortise is too tight or a dovetail is off by a hair. I fix it. This situation with Carol, with the tow company, it was just a different kind of warped grain, a more malicious kind, and I'd be damned if I let it be the thing that broke me. The tears stopped. I pushed myself off the stool, my back aching. Anger, I decided earlier, was a luxury. I was wrong. It was fuel. I strode into my tiny home office, a converted spare bedroom that still smelled faintly of paint. I wasn't going to find $1,200 in the next 2 hours, so I had to find a different tool, a different kind of leverage. I sat down at my computer, the screen's glow illuminating the sawdust motes dancing in the air. My target, prestige towing and recovery. I started with the basics, a simple web search. Their site was a cheap, generic template with stock photos of shiny tow trucks, none of which looked like the greasy vulture I imagined had hauled Bessie away. No names, no history, just the address and the phone number I now knew by heart. It was a digital dead end, designed to be anonymous. Fine. I went deeper. I navigated to the state's Secretary of State business entity search. Every legitimate business had to be registered. I typed in Prestige Towing and Recovery. A result popped up, not as a standalone company, but as a doing business as name. My breath caught. The legal owner wasn't a person. It was a parent company, an LLC I'd never heard of, Phoenix Capital Ventures, LLC. Phoenix Capital. The name scraped at the edges of my memory, raising the hairs on my arms. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. It sounded like 100 other bland, aspirational, corporate names. I searched my email for the name. Nothing. I searched my digital invoices. Nothing. Frustrated, I shoved my chair back and went to the closet where I keep my old paper files. It's a cardboard box filled with the ghosts of commissions past, old invoices, tax forms, contracts for jobs I completed years ago. I started digging, pulling out folder after folder, the smell of old paper filling the small room. A kitchen cabinet job from 2018, a set of bookshelves for a law office, and then I saw it, a faded blue folder labeled Barrett Custom Desk. Hayden Barrett, a tech guy barely out of his 20s who'd hired me 4 years ago. He was starting some kind of small investment firm and wanted a desk that screamed visionary. He was charming, ambitious, and as it turned out, completely broke. When it came time for the final payment, he'd been short $5,000. I was ready to walk, but he'd been so desperate, he'd made me a wild offer. He gave me the cash he had, and for the rest, He'd signed over a small percentage of his brand new, worthless on-paper company, an LLC. My hands were shaking as I pulled the documents from the folder, a certificate for a 2% ownership stake and a thick, staple-bound operating agreement. The name of the company, printed in an optimistic sans serif font at the top of the page, was Phoenix Capital Ventures, LLC. I stumbled back to my computer, the papers clutched in my hand like a holy text. It couldn't be. It was a forgotten, written-off debt from a starry-eyed kid. I pulled up the state business search again, my heart hammering against my ribs. I clicked through the filings for Phoenix Capital, and there, dated just 2 months ago, was an entry under recent acquisitions. Asset purchase, Prestige Towing and Recovery. A wild, hysterical laugh escaped my lips. I was a part owner. I owned a piece of the company that was holding my truck hostage. It was a miracle, a cosmic joke of the highest order. But ownership was one thing. Control was another. My eyes scanned the operating agreement in my lap, a document I had never bothered to read. It was dense with legalese, but I was no longer looking for money. I was looking for a weapon. I flew through sections on capital calls and distribution schedules until my finger landed on a paragraph, tucked away in an appendix titled Partner Accountability and Ethics. My eyes widened as I read the words. Hayden, in his youthful idealism, had written in a poison pill. The clause, 7.3b, stated that any partner, regardless of equity share, could invoke an immediate operational integrity review of any subsidiary asset if they had reason to believe its actions constituted predatory business practices or posed a significant reputational risk to the parent company. The review mandated an immediate, temporary cessation of the disputed action pending an audit by the managing partners. I read it again, and a third time. It was a contractual guillotine. Carol thought she was dealing with a dusty tradeswoman who didn't belong. She had no idea she had picked a fight with the owner. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't the smile of a victim. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted her prey. The hunt was on. The wild, hysterical laugh subsided, leaving a silence in the room that felt heavy with possibility. The operating agreement in my hands wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a blueprint for a bomb. Clause 7.3b was the detonator. Now, I just had to build it. My panic was gone, replaced by the same cold, methodical focus I get when measuring a perfect dovetail joint. There was no room for error. First, I had to act the part of the defeated. I needed them to believe they had won, to get comfortable in their petty tyranny. I picked up my phone, my hand steady, and dialed the number for Prestige Towing. The same bored voice answered. Prestige. I took a breath and infused my voice with the tremor of someone on the verge of breaking. Hi, it's the woman with the Ford F-150, the one towed from the HOA. Yeah? What about it? I have the money, I said, letting my voice crack on the last word. The $1,200. I'm getting a cashier's check now. I'll be there in about an hour or so. Please don't close before I get there. I could practically hear the smirk through the phone. Clock's ticking, lady. We close at 5. Don't be late. He hung up. Phase 1, complete. They were expecting a crying woman with a check, not a part owner with a contractual guillotine. Next, setting the mechanism. I turned back to my computer. The operating agreement named Hayden Barrett as the managing partner. A quick search on a professional networking site brought up his profile. He'd done well for himself. Phoenix Capital Ventures was no longer a worthless startup. It was a boutique private equity firm. I found the company's corporate address and, more importantly, the email for their general counsel. I opened a new document and began to type. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew how to follow instructions. I copied the language from Clause 7.3b verbatim. 2. Managing Partners, Phoenix Capital Ventures, LLC. CC. General Counsel. From Partner, Phoenix Capital Ventures, LLC. Subject. Formal invocation of Operational Integrity Review, Clause 7.3b. Pursuant to the Phoenix Capital Ventures, LLC Operating Agreement, Appendix A, Clause 7.3b, I, as a partner of record, hereby invoke an immediate operational integrity. Reason for invocation: evidence of predatory business practices and actions posing a significant reputational risk to the parent company. Specifically, the wrongful and extortionate impounding of a vehicle from a private residence in direct conflict with stated HOA bylaws, which Prestige Towing and Recovery was contractually obligated to uphold. As stipulated in Clause 7.3b, this notice mandates the immediate, temporary cessation of the disputed action, namely, the holding of said vehicle, pending a full audit by the managing partners. The vehicle, a Ford F-150, VIN, I quickly looked up Bessie's VIN from an old insurance card, must be released to its registered owner without charge, effective immediately. Failure to comply will be considered a breach of the operating agreement. I printed 3 copies on the thickest, nicest resume paper I owned. I slipped 1 copy into a crisp manila folder along with my original, notarized ownership certificate and the entire stapled operating agreement. I put the other 2 copies in separate, stamped envelopes, one addressed to Hayden Barrett at his corporate office, the other to his legal team. I dropped them in a mailbox on my way. I called for a rideshare, the final piece of my performance. A defeated woman wouldn't have a car after all. As I stood on my front step, folder in hand, waiting for the gray Prius to arrive, a familiar voice drifted across the lawn. My, off to the pound? It was Carol, of course. She was snipping the heads off her prize-winning roses with a pair of delicate silver shears, a wide-brimmed sun hat protecting her from the afternoon glare. She saw the folder in my hand and a look of supreme satisfaction settled on her face. She thought it was my vehicle title, that I was going to sign it over or beg for a payment plan. "I must say, I didn't think you had it in you," she said, her voice oozing with condescending pity, scraping together $1,200 on such short notice. That must have been quite the struggle. She paused, admiring a perfect pink blossom before mercilessly decapitating it. "I do hope this has been a valuable lesson for you about living in a community of a certain standard." This was it, the final gloat, the last twist of the knife before she considered her work done. I looked at her, standing there in her fortress of beige perfection, so smug in her victory. I thought of Bessie, of my beautiful table, of the words, "You don't deserve it." And I smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was small, quiet, and entirely for me. It held the cold, satisfying weight of a perfectly balanced hand plane. It held the certainty of a saw blade hitting its mark. I said nothing. I just held her gaze for a second longer, letting her see the smile she couldn't possibly understand. The Prius pulled up to the curb. I got in, closed the door, and didn't look back. The hunt was on. The rideshare dropped me off a block away, and I walked the rest. The air changed, growing heavy with the smell of stale gasoline, hot asphalt, and defeat. Prestige Towing and Recovery was less a business and more a vulture's nest. Tucked away in an industrial wasteland of cracked pavement and chain-link fences topped with concertina wire. It was a graveyard for bad days, and every car crammed inside was a tombstone, marking a moment of crisis. The office was a small, sun-bleached shack with barred windows. I pushed open the door, and a sad little bell chirped. Behind a plexiglass shield sat a man who was the human equivalent of the building, weathered, thick-set, and radiating an aura of profound indifference. He didn't look up from the greasy tabloid he was reading. "Help you?" he grunted. I placed my hands on the counter, letting them tremble just a little. "I called earlier. The Ford F-150. I have the check." I slid the cashier's check for $1,200 through the small opening at the bottom of the plexiglass. He finally looked up, his eyes scanning me with a flat, predatory appraisal. He saw my slightly dusty clothes, my tense posture, the folder clutched in my other hand that he probably assumed held my title and registration. He saw exactly what I wanted him to see, a woman at the end of her rope. A smug little smile touched the corner of his mouth. He picked up the check, admiring it like a trophy. "Told you we close at 5, he said, turning to a grimy computer monitor. "Just in time. Lucky you." He began to tap at the keyboard with 2 thick fingers. This was the moment. the pivot point on which the entire world was about to turn. "Actually," I said, my voice suddenly clear and steady, all tremor gone, "you can go ahead and tear that up. It won't be necessary." He stopped typing and slowly turned his head, his brow furrowed in annoyance. "What did you just say?" I slid the manila folder through the opening. It landed on the counter with a soft, authoritative thud. I said, "You won't be needing that. Open the folder." He scoffed, a little puff of air that said he'd dealt with every kind of crackpot. "Lady, I don't have time for games. You want your truck or not?" "Open it," I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. It was not a request. With an exaggerated sigh, he flipped the folder open. His eyes fell on the top page. The notarized certificate of ownership for Phoenix Capital Ventures, LLC. He blinked, confused. He flipped to the next page, the highlighted Clause 7.3b of the operating agreement. His lips moved as he tried to read the dense legalese. He looked back at me, his face a mask of irritation and bafflement. "What is this garbage? Some kind of sovereign citizen crap?" "No," I said, leaning closer to the plexiglass. "It's your employment contract. That first document is a certificate showing that I am a partner and owner of Phoenix Capital Ventures, the LLC that owns this fine establishment. And that second document is a copy of your parent company's operating agreement. I've highlighted the relevant clause for you. It's called the Operational Integrity Review." The color started to drain from his face. "It states," I continued, my voice as cold and sharp as a chisel, "that any partner can mandate an immediate cessation of any action by a subsidiary asset believed to be predatory or a reputational risk, which this is. My truck was impounded illegally under fraudulent pretenses for the purpose of extortion, so I am formally invoking that clause." He just stared, his mouth slightly agape. The tabloid, the check, the computer, it all faded away. The only thing in the world was the folder on his counter. "You're crazy," he finally stammered, shaking his head. You can't just do that." "I can, and I have," I said, tapping a fingernail on the plexiglass. "An email with this same documentation was sent to Hayden Barrett and your company's general counsel 20 minutes ago, which means as of right now, you are holding my property in direct violation of a mandate from your parent company's ownership. Every minute you continue to hold it, you are personally violating the terms of the agreement that governs your business." I imagine the managing partners take that very, very seriously. Panic. Pure, beautiful, gut-twisting panic exploded in his eyes. The smug gatekeeper vanished, replaced by a cornered animal. He snatched the folder and read the clause again, his face turning a blotchy red. He fumbled for his phone, his thick fingers suddenly clumsy. "Who do you think you're calling?" I asked sweetly. "Your boss? Because, in a manner of speaking, you're looking at her. Or are you calling Carol's nephew? I'm sure he'll be fascinated to learn that his little kickback scheme just got him crosswise with a private equity firm." His hand froze over the phone. He looked from the documents to me and back again. The bluster, the arrogance, the casual cruelty, it all collapsed, leaving behind a terrified, sweaty man in a box. He was trapped, the same way I had been trapped that morning, the same way Carol had trapped me. But my trap was made of corporate law and his own company's bylaws. It was inescapable. He swallowed hard, his throat clicking. Without another word, he turned, grabbed a set of keys from a hook on the wall, and stormed out the office door into the yard. A moment later, I heard the glorious, unmistakable sound of Bessie's engine roaring to life. He drove her out of the gate and left her idling by the curb, not even daring to make eye contact as he stalked back to his little shack. I walked past him, opened Bessie's door, and slid into the driver's seat. My hands closed around the familiar worn leather of the steering wheel. She was safe. I was safe. I glanced back at the office. He was standing behind the plexiglass, just watching me, his face pale. On the counter, forgotten, lay the cashier's check for $1,200, a pristine monument to a battle he never even knew he was fighting. I put Bessie in drive, leaving him there in his glass cage, and pulled away from the curb. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. I drove home with the windows down, letting the cool evening air wash over me. The familiar rumble of Bessie's engine was the most beautiful sound in the world, a steady heartbeat confirming she was alive and well. The cashier's check for $1,200 was still on the passenger seat, a useless piece of paper now. It was a souvenir, a receipt for a victory that cost my opponent everything, and me nothing. I hadn't even made it back to my driveway before my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I pulled over, my heart giving a little kick. "Hello," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Is this the partner from the email?" The voice was young, male, and vibrating with an anxiety so potent I could feel it through the phone. "This is she," I said. "Oh, thank God. This is Hayden Barrett. From Phoenix Capital? I am so sorry. I just got your email. I'm in a board meeting, and I literally ran out of the room. Are you okay? Did you get your truck? My counsel is already drafting a formal termination of our contract with that HOA. Hayden? The starry-eyed kid with the big desk and the empty pockets. He didn't sound like a kid anymore. He sounded like a man watching his company's reputation teeter on the edge of a cliff. I have my truck, Hayden. No thanks to your subsidiary manager, I said, letting a little ice creep into my tone. And speaking of your manager, he let something interesting slip. Something about Carol's nephew and a kickback scheme. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. What? It seems your new asset, Prestige Towing, might have a history of engaging in fraud with my HOA president, I said, enjoying the weight of every word. Which is why, as a partner, I feel it's my fiduciary duty to insist on a full forensic audit of their books. We need to know how deep the rot goes. Wouldn't want a lawsuit for racketeering to tarnish Phoenix Capital's good name, would we? The silence that followed was thick with the sound of his frantic calculations. He was trapped. I had him. Please, he finally whispered, the professional veneer completely gone. Please don't. An audit, a lawsuit that would be catastrophic. What do you want? Whatever the damages, Phoenix will cover it. Just name a price. We can settle this right now. A tempting offer, easy money. But it wasn't his money I wanted. It was hers. No, I said. This isn't about you, Hayden. This is about her, the woman who did this. I'll handle the settlement negotiations myself. All I need from you is your word that if she doesn't cooperate, you'll authorize that audit. And one more thing. I want you to deliver the news about the contract severance personally, to her. Done, he said, the relief in his voice palpable. Anything, consider it done. An hour later, I was in my workshop, wiping a cloth over the surface of the walnut table, when the pounding started. It wasn't a knock. It was a frantic, furious hammering on my front door. I smiled, set my cloth down, and walked calmly to open it. Carol stood on my porch, her face a blotchy, contorted mask of rage. Her perfect silver helmet of hair was actually disheveled. What did you do? She shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. I just got a call from the head of Phoenix Capital Ventures. He's terminating their contract? He said it was because of you. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. That's right, he did. How? Who do you think you are? I'm a partner at Phoenix Capital Ventures, I said, my voice quiet and serene. I own a piece of the company you sicked on me. The company you had a very cozy, very illegal kickback scheme with. The color drained from her face. The rage was instantly extinguished, replaced by the stark, wide-eyed terror of a cornered animal. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Don't you, Carol? I took a step forward, and she instinctively flinched back. I have the authority to launch a full, invasive, and deeply unpleasant audit into every single invoice Prestige Towing has ever sent this HOA. An audit that would uncover exactly how much money was being funneled to your nephew. An audit that would be the cornerstone of a rather nasty lawsuit against you personally for fraud. She began to shake her head, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. The neighborhood queen, the iron-fisted ruler of beige suburbia, was utterly broken. Please, she finally choked out, the word dissolving into a pathetic sob. Please, don't. It was just a small fee, a finder's fee. We can fix this. I can fix this. What do you want? There it was, the begging. It was even sweeter than I'd imagined. I let her hang in that desperate silence for a long moment before I delivered the killing blow. You're right. We can fix this, I said. I've been thinking about the damages, the risk to my business, the potential loss of my biggest commission, the stress, the humiliation, the sheer audacity of you telling me I didn't deserve my success. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice dropping to a whisper. There will be a settlement, a severance package, if you will, to compensate me for the professional and emotional damages you've caused. The price for my silence, Carol, is $10,000. You will pay me, and I will choose not to pursue the lawsuit. You won't, and I will burn your entire world to the ground. The choice is yours. And so, here we are, back where we started, with me holding this crisp rectangle of vindication. The transaction itself was almost anticlimactic. The next morning, Carol appeared at the edge of my driveway, not with the furious bluster of the night before, but with the shuffling, downcast posture of a deposed queen. She looked smaller somehow. Her silver hair was perfect again, but it looked like a helmet on a stranger. She couldn't meet my eyes. She just stood there on the public sidewalk, refusing to step onto my property, and held out the envelope. Her hand trembled. I didn't say a word. I just walked over, took it from her, and opened it. Inside was the cashier's check. $10,000. Signed by Carol. The price of her silence. The cost of underestimating me. I looked from the check to her face, letting the silence stretch until it was excruciating. She finally cracked, muttering a barely audible, "I'm sorry," before turning and scurrying back to her beige fortress. It wasn't an apology born of remorse. It was the desperate plea of a cornered animal. It was enough. That, right there, should have been the end of it. But when you build a trap as perfectly as I did, the consequences tend to ripple. Hayden Barrett, true to his word, formally terminated Phoenix Capital's contract with our HOA. In his letter to the board, he was legally obligated to state the reason, a credible accusation of a fraudulent kickback scheme orchestrated by the HOA president. The fallout was nuclear. The phantom other residents Carol was so fond of invoking suddenly became very real and very angry. An emergency board meeting was called. I didn't attend, but I heard all about it. Carol was stripped of her title, her power, her entire identity within the neighborhood she had terrorized. Now, when I see her, she's the one who flinches. She's a ghost haunting her own prize-winning roses, while neighbors she once lorded over across the street to avoid her. She didn't just lose her power, she lost her audience. For a woman like Carol, that was a fate worse than death. As for the money, the $10,000 sits in a separate account I've named the You Don't Deserve It Fund. It's my armor. It's the buffer that ensures no petty tyrant can ever hold my livelihood hostage again. It's the freedom to say no to a client I don't like, to take a week off, to buy a rare slab of wood just because it speaks to me. It didn't make me rich, but it made me secure. It bought me peace of mind, which, as it turns out, is priceless. The tech CEO, by the way, was ecstatic with his table. He called it a masterpiece. And my name is now on the wait list of 2 different architectural firms. Bessie is parked in the driveway in her rightful spot, gleaming in the sun. She's more than a work truck now. She's a trophy, a symbol that I belong, not because I fit into some beige, manicured ideal, but because I built my place here with my own 2 hands. I earned it, and I defended it. It's funny, Carol thought she was punishing me for working with my hands, for the sawdust on my boots, but in the end, that's what saved me. I'm a builder. I see a problem, I find the right tools, and I construct a solution. This time, the tools just happen to be a forgotten contract and a healthy dose of rage. If you enjoyed watching a bully get a lesson in karma, and you believe in fighting for what you've earned, you'll probably want to follow along. Hit that subscribe button, because I have a feeling this won't be the last time I have to build my own justice.